Hello, this is Robbie Mitchell here from Head in the Cloud Development. Today I'm going to show you how to create a MapReduce script in NetSuite that is capable of processing records on a scale of at least a few million. This video is being recorded in October 2024 on NetSuite version 2024.2. This video is intended for NetSuite developers and administrators. You'll need the administrator role in NetSuite to do everything I cover here. You should at least be familiar with JavaScript and basic web technologies here. We're going to be coding in TypeScript using the SuiteScript 2.1 API. And again, I'm going to walk through the creation of a MapReduce script that will inactivate large numbers of records. Basically, there are many ways you could try to do this task that wouldn't work. I'm going to talk you through an algorithm that you can use to process very large numbers of records. For example, I've processed up to 2.5 million records in production NetSuite accounts using this script. So a quick note on software requirements. If you want to follow along exactly, you'll want to have WebStorm and Node.js installed. You can of course also do this in VS Code, which is totally free if you're familiar with using the SDF plugin there. I'm not going to walk through downloading and installing the applications here because I do that in my other videos. But to give you a nice starting point, I have prepared an SDF account customization project here on GitHub. So let's download this code and get started. I'm just going to download it directly. And unzip this file. I just move it into my documents. Okay, after you open it, the first thing you'll want to do is run npm install to install the required node modules. If you're not yet familiar with files like package.json and tsconfig.json, then I recommend you watch some of my other tutorials where we walk through this in a bit more depth. In this video, we're going to jump right in. So first, let's talk about our goal here. I'm going to log into NetSuite. So this is my development account, and I'm going to show you a list of records here. So let's talk about our goal. Let's say you have a lot of records that you want to delete or inactivate or maybe make a simple update to. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot, like more than what you could easily do with a mass update or a CSV import. I'm talking on the scale of hundreds of thousands up to even millions of records here. For example, here in my test account, I have this custom record called campsite. And oh man, what if I've accidentally just created like 3 million garbage records and I want to get rid of them all? Well, like I said, there are many approaches that won't work or will take literally forever, but I'll show you one approach that will work. So first what we need to do is create a saved search that represents the bad records that we want to get rid of. So I'm just going to click search. I'm going to make a saved search. I'm going to make it public, and I'm going to call it campsites to inactivate. And basically my criteria are, I know when I created these records, my mistake was on September 1st, so I'm just going to say anything created on or after September 1st. And let's see what we get. Yeah, here's 3.4, nearly 3.5 million records. So that'll give us some test data to work with. So now that we have our search, let's look at some code. So I've given you a mostly blank starting point of a MapReduce script here. This is kind of our shell MapReduce script. Now, the most important thing I can teach you about NetSuite development is to do things iteratively. In other words, test early and often. Don't spend hours writing code, hoping it's all going to work out in the end. Instead, test as you go, and if something does break, you'll know exactly what it is. That being said, let's upload this, create our script, and run an initial test just with what we have here. So to compile this, I just run tsc, and that will generate the JavaScript file here in my file cabinet. And I want to upload this file, but I know to do that I need to have this account set as my default account. So I'm going to quickly, this will be a good thing to demo. So NetSuite changed their authentication protocols pretty recently, and if you haven't used the SDF plugin in a little while, you'll get this message saying that you might just need to delete this file. So let's see if I can figure out how to do that. I've got a terminal link here on my taskbar. See if I can go to this folder. Okay, can I use the rm command to remove it? Yeah, that seems to have worked. Let's try this again then. So if I go back to my NetSuite settings, okay, yeah, now I see a blank account list. So I'm just going to do browser-based authentication. When I click this, it should open an OAuth 2 authorization screen. If you haven't enabled OAuth 2, you'll get a message saying it's not enabled, and you just need to go to Company, Enable Features, and SuiteCloud to turn that on. Then try it. And that should allow this to work. Okay, it's just appeared there. Okay, credentials added. And then on project settings, I'm just going to make sure this account is set as the default, and it is. So now I should just be able to right-click on this file and say Upload to Account. It says it's uploading. Okay, good. Good first step done here. So now in the account, let's create our script record. Scripting scripts new. What's the name of the file? HITC inactivate records. I'm going to copy the script name. I'll set a script ID. And let's save this. Go ahead and deploy it. I'm going to clear the concurrency limit because I want this to be able to run on all my available script queues. And I'm going to set the priority to high just because I want to see it get done quickly. Now, I honestly would not recommend that you do this if you're doing this in a production account, because the likelihood is that this is probably not a high priority operation for you, and you don't want to block your queues, or as I do. So in real life, you should probably set this to low if you're in a production NetSuite account. So on my script deployment, I'm just going to go ahead and do save and execute. Again, all it should do now is just log that it isn't broken yet. Okay, I think it actually failed because I'm not even returning anything yet here. So it literally has nothing to process. So to make it happy, let's just return an empty array. That was a good first test. Again, we'll compile that. Then we'll upload our file. Okay, let's run it again. Okay, That time it finished correctly, so good. So while we're here on the script in NetSuite, let's set up our script parameter for that saved search that we created. Basically, we're going to use this search to tell our script which records to operate on. I'll save my parameter. And then let's copy this ID here. And the way we extract the parameter is we use the runtime module. So here we can say const search ID equals runtime.getCurrentScript.getParameter. The name is that ID, and let's say as string so the compiler knows what this is. Now good logging is very important, so we're going to log which search we're loading here. Oops. Okay, now let's just pause for a second and talk about our strategy. When we're dealing with this many search results, there's no way we can simply run the search and gather up all the record IDs in one go. Trust me, I've tried. Instead, we can harness the power of MapReduce to break up this task intelligently. So we're going to break this down into 3 very simple steps. First, here in getInputData, we're simply going to find out the total number of results that we're dealing with. Once we know how many results there are, we're going to queue up an instance of map here to process each batch of 1,000 results. Then here in map, we're going to retrieve our specified batch of 1,000 results and pass their internal IDs on to Reduce to be updated. Then in Reduce, we simply inactivate each of the 1,000 results passed into the instance. Does that sound simple enough? So we're basically doing things in pre-identified batches of 1,000. It wasn't so easy to discover this pattern, but it works pretty well. So let's do it. We're going to create an array of batches here that we can pass into map for each 1,000 results. So first we're going to run the search with a count summary on the internal ID column in order to find out how many total results the search has. Let me show you that in the UI here, just in case you're not clear. So if we edit our search, first of all, it's good to remove the columns that we're not going to actually use. And what I mean is, if we do a count on internal ID, what that means is that instead of getting 3.5 million search results, we get 1 search result telling us that there are 3.48 million internal ID results. So let's undo that. And we're going to do that in our code, not in our saved search here. Okay, now our search is back to giving us all results. That's good. So here in the code, first we're going to load the search. Oh yeah, I need to add in the search module, obviously. Okay, once we have the search loaded, this is how we add in our summarized internal ID column. So we're basically replacing whatever columns were there with just this one, which is fine. Then we're going to run our search. We really only need to retrieve the first result here, so that's fine. And then we can read the count from that search result. That comes out as a string, in case you're wondering. Now let's log what that is, just so we can confirm it here. Okay, before we go any further, let's do a quick test to make sure this total is coming through okay. So now on my deployment, I need to remember to set that saved search in the parameter. Campsites to inactivate. There it is. Save and execute. Okay, yep, it's reading the correct number of results, so that's good. Let's keep going. So now let's use a loop to populate our array of batches for each 1,000 results. And just to note, we're just using the search ID as a string here in our batches array. The value of what we're passing in here isn't very important. What is important is the length of the array that we generate. So in other words, for each 1,000 results, we're pushing something into our array. That way we have that many batches that get returned. So now in map, we're going to use the context key multiplied by 1,000 as the starting point of our search. So the starting point of our search is the batch number times 1,000, basically. So the first one will be 0, the second batch will be at 1,000, the third batch is at 2,000, etc. So we're going to get 1,000 results from our start, and the end is basically the start plus 1,000. So then for each result, we're going to write its internal ID to reduce. And the way that we're going to write it is to write the record type and the record ID. And I thought about how I wanted to demonstrate this, because if you want to be safe, what you could do is basically hard code a certain record type, such as custom record campsite, to basically protect your script from, let's say somebody creates a transaction search and runs it on a bunch of transactions. Now we're just going to be inactivating records, so that's fine. You can't even do that on transactions. But if you were deleting records, you wouldn't want this script to be able to accidentally be run on transactions. But for our scenario, we're going to extract the record type from the search result. along with the record ID, obviously. So that's how we write out 1,000 record IDs to a single reduce instance. So now in reduce, keep in mind that the values from the reduce context is an array of all the records passed in from map. So we'll use a for each loop to process them. First a log. So each value in the values passed into this reduce represents a single record. So I'm going to parse that here. And then we're going to use a try catch to inactivate the record. And to do that, I need the record module. And let's, of course, log that we've inactivated a record. If a record failed, we'll just log why it failed here. Okay, let's compile and upload and kick this off. Okay, so look, get input data finished almost instantly. We're already processing through batches to identify the batches of 1,000 to be inactivated here. So that's great. Now let's talk about performance for a minute. I'll mention that in my experience, on an account that has a SuiteCloud Plus license, it took just over an hour for each 100,000 records. So for example, we had about 2.4 million records to process, and that took about 25 hours, but it executed beautifully. And just to show you a real example here in my demo account, I had a very similar script for creating these campsite records. I'm just going to show you how long it took my campsite creation script to run. So I had it creating about 1.6 million records at a time, and I ran it a couple of times. But for example, the last time I ran it, it took, looks like about 58 hours here, so 2 days plus 10 hours. The time before that, it took even longer. It took 3 days plus that many hours. And this is a slow demo account with only 2 concurrency. So demo accounts are obviously going to be much slower than production NetSuite, but either way you go, executing the script this way will run as quickly as possible using the queues that you have, and eventually it will process all of your records. Now before we depart, just a couple of other tips I want to mention. MapReduce scripts do actually have a memory limit. So if you find that you're running into that, you could try removing the record type value here and just hard coding it down here instead. Because basically the memory limit is how much NetSuite allows you to store in memory, between the various phases here. So if you're writing out 1,000 records over 1,000 different instances, it slowly adds up. It takes a lot to exceed NetSuite's memory limits. I haven't done it here recently, but if possible, you can just find ways to make the values that you're writing out smaller. Maybe you just write out a record ID, for example. Or of course, you could just process smaller batches. Second, the reduce function here only gets 5,000 governance usage points, which means that if we're processing records that cost more than 5 points to update, you're going to run out of usage points before you can process 1,000 records. So if you're working with transactions, for example, you probably just need to reduce your batch size from 1,000 down to 500 records per instance. But that concludes our Suite scripting tutorial for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, we'll see you at Suite World. Thank you for watching.